Welcome to a religious education 5-minute recap. We are on the exam board Eduqas. We are looking at foundational Catholic theology and we're exploring the unit of origins and meaning. Today our session is going to focus on non-religious beliefs about creation, and the aim is that you can explain those non-religious views about the origins of the universe. So starting us off, when we talk about non-religious, what we're generally talking about is science and scientific ideas about creation. And to start off, we need to understand that science bases its knowledge upon evidence and things which can be tested. Now, the word that we can use for this is called empirical knowledge. And what that means is it's knowledge that you gain through sense observation. So if you can see, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it, if you can interact with it, then that would be a good source of empirical knowledge. And to discover where the universe has come from, science will rely upon this empirical evidence to discover that answer, which is why so many people find it convincing. So science and the universe then, the most reasonable explanation that science can provide for the creation of the universe is actually the Big Bang. But strangely enough, the Big Bang wasn't a huge explosion, as the name suggests. It was more of an expansion, and you've got to imagine it like a balloon being blown up. It starts off at a very, very small point, smaller than we can possibly comprehend. It's called a quantum singularity, and that quantum singularity expands just like a balloon would. So if we explain this in a bit of detail, about 14 billion years ago, there's a single point of the quantum singularity, and that expands. That expansion is called the Big Bang. As it expands, it creates time, space, and matter. So we start to get atoms. Now gravity starts to pull some of that matter together, and it starts to form stars. Now, some of those stars, they're unstable, or they reach the end of their lives, they explode, they spread more matter throughout the universe, and some of this matter forms other stars and planets. One of those planets happened to be ours, Earth. So you can kind of see how this is a domino effect from that first point of that expansion of the Big Bang. And really, just as Stephen Hawking, a famous scientist, said, when we look around the universe, ultimately, everything has come from stars. Everything's made of stardust, really. So how do scientists know that this Big Bang has actually happened? Well, there's two key pieces of evidence, really. Number one, the universe is still expanding today. And we'll look at that in a little bit of detail. If the universe is still expanding, we can actually measure that, and we can measure it through using light and a process called redshift. Basically, when we start looking at the light spectrum and we find out about the movements of planets and stars, we realize that they're moving away from us. If we track back that movement, it suggests that all of creation has come from a single point that then expanded. That would be the Big Bang. Now, the other source of evidence we've got is heat from an expansion can actually be measured. So NASA sent out essentially like a satellite into space, and that started to measure huge pockets of heat called cosmic microwave background radiation. And what this suggests to us is that a huge expansion happened, therefore the Big Bang must have happened. So do any scientists actually support this idea of the Big Bang? In a nutshell, yes, lots. Now, I've got a few images on the board, but the first person here is a guy called Edwin Hubble. Now, he used a very powerful telescope, and he discovered that galaxies were actually expanding. If they're expanding, that suggests, therefore, they must have come from a point, and that point is the expansion of the Big Bang. We've got a guy called Gamov, a Russian scientist, and he suggested that, the beginning of the universe, it might have been very hot and full of energy, full of potential, and then that created the entire universe. And he actually used the phrase, it was almost like a Big Bang, like a nuclear explosion creating everything. There are also these two guys called Wilson and Penzias. Now, they weren't looking to prove the Big Bang, but they basically were using some of their equipment, and on their satellites they picked up this odd and strange background noise, and it was part of radiation. And actually what they discovered was that background radiation, which proves that there was leftover heat from a huge expansion. And finally, we've got Stephen Hawking, and he says, because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. So for Stephen Hawking, he believes the most reasonable explanation for the universe is that it came from nothing. And when he says nothing, what he means is no God. The only reasonable explanation is that it expanded from the Big Bang. So, checking your knowledge for today. I would take each of these key terms and I would try and write a sentence about each one. If you can do that, then you've been successful today. If you're finding it tough, pause the video, rewind it, go back through, check out your answers. If you want to go a little bit further, then we've got a few questions on the screen for you, which you can by all means plan and go through. Thank you very much for your time today, and take care.